Hello, and welcome to the Regrettable Century. It is Chris, Jason, and Ben, and today we are talking about the new left. We read an article that is an interview with an author, Terence Renaud.
Yeah, something like that.
Renaud. Terence Renaud.
That's the one. There we go.
About a book he wrote that is called New Lefts, that's with an S at the end of left. The Making of a Radical Tradition. And we are, big critics of the new left and the old left and the contemporary left. And we figured this would be a good article to stoke some discussion about all the different lefts.
Yeah, it gives us a plural left to be critical of. Lefts.
Right. The more lefts to be critical of, the better.
We're also, or at least I am critical of even just the use of the term left, because over the years I've been won over to the idea that the concept itself is too fuzzy. And so, a lot of people will say like, oh, I'm not liberal, I'm left. And that's supposed to be like that clarifies things for them. And I just don't think it does. And so in as much as we're thinking of the political continuum as linear, there's it drifts to the left or to the right.
That's a mistake.
Yeah, exactly. And so I'm a socialist. I'm in favor of getting rid of capitalism. Within that, maybe there's a useful discussion to be had about like left or right.
Right.
But if the discussion is just what there is, then liberal and left are just shades of opinion. And
well, one of the things the interview clarifies is that so left and right are contingent upon the sort of institutional state of the socialist and labor movement, or the communist movement, or communist states in the world. And so in that context, saying you're left can charitably, without defining it, mean you have something approaching socialist politics. You're concerned with class struggle and political economy. But in our context, it means something very different. And it's kind of used, it's used in a kind of trans-historical reference, which is kind of loses itself.
Yeah, and I think that there's a drift, which it doesn't happen all at once, but like how we get from a period of a socialist versus like the pro-capitalist sectors of society, and how that eventually drifts over into now the left is the thing that we're all trying to find our place within, and political figures who do not represent a challenge to the system, they are the left. And we say, yes, that's true, but I'm even more left. It's like, so how do we get from how do we get to this state of just total confusion, and how the insistence upon this moniker does absolutely nothing to clarify any question? I think that's the point of this. At least that's the point I want to get out of this episode.
A really good example of how useless this sort of argument is the idea of class first leftists not being real leftists because they subordinate oppressions to the concept of class. And that's not what a real leftist would do. That puts them further to the right. And actually it makes them Nazis, which are right-wingers and not leftists at all. So regardless of what sort of orientation these class-first leftists have to everything, they're Nazis if they don't put issues of identity at the same level or above the issue of class. However, if you put issues of identity first and class lower, then you're still vaguely somewhere over here on the left, right?
Right, yeah.
Yeah.
But if we were to be technically, correct. You cannot actually have a culturally left diagnosis of identity without it being fully imbued and entangled in class, and vice versa. So you cannot really be for something like liberation of marginalized communities without having some kind of class first understanding of that oppression.
Right, but if you say oh, the white working class is racist, I don't concern myself with the politics of class. I believe that all men suck and that women should be in charge of everything. That makes you a radical leftist.
Right.
Somehow, I mean, that right there, that was obviously like a hyperbolic. I
Sure.
mean, not really. If you went to college where we went to college, it's not that hyperbolic.
If you went to college, period, it's not hyperbolic.
Yeah, for sure.
Another example of recent times that you hear from socialists, and this is just in a point of rhetoric, and it's accurate rhetorically, is to say Marjorie Taylor Greene is to the left of Bernie Sanders on Palestine.
That's true.
So there's these like rhetorical meanings. We know what they mean. And then there's the other sort of populist truism that it's not, stop getting distracted by left and right. It's about looking up. It's about ruling class. It's about, and that's a thing that's been lost from the quote unquote left.
Right. So like, how do we move from socialism as the articulated political expression of a workers' movement to the Popular Front as the broad forces of democracy being led by the workers' movement, to the New Left, which is just somehow the same as the Popular Front, but just less clear, to today's social justice. I'm not liberal, I'm actually left because I'm in favor of a more uncompromising vision of the things which you think the liberals stand for. Like, how is that possible?
Well, one of the great things about this, I really want to read this book, by the way, Jason, by Renaud. This article, which one of the things I love about this podcast is that you bring up articles that somehow I missed 3 or 4 years ago. This is from The Nation in 2022, and it's like, oh man, this is really excellent. And I love that we're sort of not on the hype machine of only paying attention to what's being discussed everywhere.
Yeah, we only pay attention to what was discussed everywhere a few years ago.
Exactly.
No, so what happened was that I read about a dozen or so articles about this heterogeneous, vague concept of the left, and I couldn't find one which fully captured what I was trying to get at, and this is the closest. This one does the most, and really what I think it says is that I could learn a lot from this book. So I also want to read the book at some point.
We should read it together. So
read it to each other.
Yeah, aloud to each other, bedtime.
Yeah.
The thing that I love about this article, well, what the author's saying about the book in the interview, is that he's the new left, as we're familiar with, is a phenomenon that has antecedents, but really gets going after Khrushchev's speech, and in the 60s and 70s, and all the orgs we're familiar with, SDS and so on. That's sort of what we mean by the new left, but he's tracing it sort of throughout the 20th century as many new lefts, plural. And it's kind of almost a necessary critique of existing left institutions, the old left, but it cannot come into being without the existence of the old left. They're mutually reinforcing, and I guess at their best, they make, the new left can make the old left better. But I just found that really useful, because instead of just fixating on the new left as like this revisionist sort of historically independent faction and force that is straying away from the true course. No, there's reasons historically why it comes into being.
That's sort of Varn's point every time people criticize the new left is he brings up the fact that the new left only sucks because of how much the old left sucked. And yeah, that's fair play. Yeah, I agree. That's a fair point.
I mean, yeah, I think even the first use of the term "new left" was a description of a hoped for outcome of a kind of meeting of the minds of a public kind of convergence of figures from the socialist and communist movements coming together to talk about what is needed now, as distinct from what we've been used to. And so then the commentators on that were like, what is this new left? And if you think about just the term new left, it kind of speaks for itself. Like, yes, of course, it's only relational in that
Yes.
it's only descriptive in a relational sense.
Right, yeah. There needs to be an existing left for the new left to distinguish itself from by calling itself new.
Yeah.
It's kind of like new metal, but equally as cool.
Well, it's at least, yeah. You know what? Yeah, I think I'm prepared to accept that. It's at least equally as useful.
Yeah. Like the SDS is about as useful as corn,
Okay.
and the Revolutionary Communist Party is about as useful as coal chamber.
And then, of course, in this analogy, Randy Rhoads is the Communist Party.
Randy Rhoads,
It's all over
sure.
my head. All over
Randy
my head.
Rhoads is the Communist Party in the 30s. That's the Black Belt thesis.
Oh, okay. Randy Rhoads is a black belt thesis. Specifically, the guitar
kinda
solo
think
for
that-
Mr. Crowley is.
I kind of think that maybe it's Mayhem who's the Black Belt thesis.
Okay. Yeah. Sure.
Anyways, maybe we should read the article.
Well, I was going to read this passage that the interviewer, Daniel Steinmetz Jenkins, is kind of setting up the interview. He says, given its anti-authoritarianism and desire to resist hierarchies, the New Left sought a politics of permanent democratic renewal. A key challenge facing it then involved a risk to succumbing to the very institutional formalization that it sought to resist. And he notes that it's typical to ascribe the New Left's undoing by the 70s to its inability, if not refusal, to wield institutional political power.
Right.
Good summary.
Also happens
Sort
to be my criticism, but also the criticism of our type of anarchism.
Right. I was about to say, like, the new left shook off the shackles of, like, effectiveness and the drive to gain power and the ability to wield it, and adopted the ineffective organization style of anarchism. Yeah, that's one of the things that it did, among many others. Do you want me to start reading at the introduction? Because
I think so.
Well,
Okay.
I just read part of it, but
yeah.
But anyway, you know what I'm saying here? Like, I don't know if this author is making the same critique as Varn.
I don't think so.
There's kind of a way of saying it that flattens it. I think it's a lot more. There's almost like there's a dialectical process unfolding between old and new left that has to do with the Soviet Union and China and all the different formations globally. It has to do with Western capitalist democracy and imperialism. It has to do with internal policies, the Red Scare. It has to do with Trotskyism and socialism and all of that. So all of these things are sort of, affecting one another in history. There's not a static breaking point in which there's some kind of betrayal.
No. It's really the problem with the new left lies in a throwing the baby out with the bathwater sort of a situation.
Yeah.
Right? The baby shit in the bathwater, and babies are gonna shit. That's just how it goes. You don't throw away the baby when it shits. And that's what the new left did.
Yeah.
Yes,
it's
perfect.
good, right? It's worth
That's exactly
repeating.
right. Yeah.
But again, when the shit is the bath, right? Which when the whole bathtub is shit, which some people were feeling that way at various moments in response to Comintern policy. That's what gives rise to these schismatic breaks and these, what are you guys doing?
Getting ready to read.
Go ahead. So everyone's looking at their phone, and I'm trying to find my way out of this image of the bathtub being full of shit.
I think the answer to that is just to stay.
All right. All right.
Yeah. And so the analogy goes this way. It's like, it's what we've always said about, like, when was the Soviet Union irredeemable? When it collapsed in, with the fall of the Soviet Union. And when is China irredeemable? Well, so far as I can tell, it's not yet. So we're big advocates of cleaning up the baby, cleaning up the bathtub, and putting some new water in it.
I mean, honestly, like you might even be, I'm willing to have this discussion about the possibility that the Soviet Union was really not irredeemable until after Vladimir Putin becomes president. Because in the 90s, whenever it's Zyuganov versus Yeltsin, there's the possibility that, maybe we should just vote the communists back in.
Yeah. Well, there was a possibility, and then Bill Clinton told Yeltsin to bomb Parliament.
Well, yeah.
Yeah, Yeltsin, the inveterate alcoholic who wound up like naked on the street in the States when he visited the diplomatic trip.
He really was way more of a piece of shit than like anyone realizes, I think. Like, if you read anything about him when he was a member of the Communist Party, like he was a boss and a party boss in some, like, I don't know, location outside of Moscow. And he basically gets sidelined by Gorbachev and Gorbachev's like clique, and never taken seriously. And he tries to worm his way into their clique to gain power, and then decides that he's going to destroy them. And that's like the primary motivation behind everything he does. He like completely abandons his communist ideology because he didn't get to be in charge when he wanted to be in charge, and so thus tanks the entire fucking Soviet Union in order to turn it into a complete fucking gangsterocracy that was just being looted by the West.
Yeah.
Anyway,
freedom.
Yeah. Anyway, I guess I'll start reading.
We're going to get all these comments on the YouTube video about somebody saying 19 minutes in, they didn't start reading. I'm out.
Well, guess what?
Yeah, fuck those people.
It turns out that this episode is about Boris Yeltsin, everybody. So
yeah. The New Left of the 1960s is often seen as a transatlantic, if not global, rebellion of the young against the cultural and political values of their parents' generation, as well as the Vietnam War. Part of what makes this New Left new was its adherents' disillusionment with existing political organizations and parties. Social democratic reformism, traditional labor parties, and the Soviet bloc were seen as either too bureaucratic or not sufficiently democratic. In general, the New Left, which championed numerous causes, the anti-war movement, women's rights, gay rights, civil rights, environmentalism, etc., purged to non-hierarchical associations based on direct democracy. Given its anti-authoritarianism, hey, shout out to Ben for having already read this part. Given its anti-authoritarianism and desire to resist hierarchies, the New Left sought a politics of permanent democratic renewal. Oh, so Ben dips out. He's mad. He just leaves because we're reading the shit that he read. Oh, okay, he's back. All right.
My computer did not like you mocking me.
A key challenge. Wait, where was I? Given its anti-authoritarianism and desire to resist hierarchies, the New Left sought a politics of permanent democratic renewal. A key challenge facing it, then, involved the risk of succumbing to the very institutional formalization that it sought to resist. Indeed, it's typical to ascribe the New Left's undoing by the 1970s to its inability, if not refusal, to wield institutional political power. I think we've pretty well covered this in discussion already. I'm just going to keep going.
Yeah.
This tension between the new left, driven by a desire for a perpetual renewal, versus old left, marked by the institutionalization of power, lies at the heart of Terence Renaud's New Lefts, The Making of a Radical Tradition. A historian and lecturer in the Humanities Program and Department of History at Yale University, Renaud argues that there have been many new lefts in rebellion against various incarnations of the old left. His history offers a different story of new leftism, from its anti-fascist roots in the first half of the 20th century, to its post-war reconstruction of the 1950s, to its explosive reinvention of the 1960s counterculture. In doing so, he aims to highlight each generation's internal revolts against their organized forms of established parties and unions and their desire to create non-party forms of organization. Part of Renaud's argument is that the old left spurred the formation of the new left, which made their peace in turn with institutionalized politics and thus, over time, came to resemble their forebears. Can we simply see these movements as a recurring generational story that plays itself out on the left? Can such a cycle be resisted? And what is the legacy of the 1960s New Left and its precursors today, especially given the Occupy Wall Street movement and beyond? The Nation spoke with Renaud about these and other questions raised by his vital new book. I think that the questions asked in this introduction by the interviewer are the most banal and uninteresting part of this interview.
Well,
Yeah.
just a setup. Yeah.
No, I know, but it's like, oh no, they ended up reinforcing the things that they were rebelling against. Can we break out of this cycle? I said, why would we want to break out of the cycle? Gaining institutional power, we need to break out of that cycle.
Is that what he means? I think he's saying not.
He says that
not
they
gaining.
come. He says they come to emulate the things they rebelled against, and one of the things that they rebelled against was institutionalization.
Okay.
Right?
That's the way I read it.
Yeah, and at the beginning, he says that one of the things they sought to oppose was institutional power. And then they accidentally gain it. But I don't think that's true, though, in a lot of instances.
They don't gain. It's not the same, right? Like, the institutionalization of the new left is a far cry from what preceded them. They're recuperated. So that's kind of a broad statement. Yeah,
it's a different problem that the author's not like. Yeah.
It's institutionalized by capitalist order.
Right. What's on display here is the Nation and its editorial line.
Exactly.
It's the idea that we represent the left and we're good because the left is good. And why would you not want to do things the way that they've been done? What are you saying? You want to go back to having communist parties that contend for power? What's wrong with
the worst
anti-fascist roots in the post-war reconstruction and the reinvention in the counterculture? Like, that's all the good stuff. I would argue that that's all that's the stuff to be criticized and to be examined and to try to find the roots of degeneration. That's not to say that I think that those are necessarily bad things.
Well,
maybe they're not, but I think that it's possible that we should consider that they might be.
I would definitely say that counterculturalization, whatever, the turning of leftism into counterculture is definitely the root of many of the things that we despise about the completely useless and ineffectual left that exists today. It's one of the things that we have to dearly need to break out of, is this idea of the left as counterculture.
Yeah, I think that's right. I mean, it's like in the same way, he points out that the roots lie in the anti-fascist coalitions. It's like that's an important that's a point of contention among a lot of people who are self-styled whatever they're on the left, whatever they represent, they purport to represent a better understanding of what it means to build a left. They'll say things like, "Oh, the Popular Front, that was the mistake." It's like, well, I think I might agree with you, but only in as much as the leadership of communists was abandoned in favor of the Popular Front as like a permanent ethic, as to elevate the tactic and the strategy to the level of principle, which is where I think we get the concept of the left in the first place.
Well, yeah, I mean, I was looking later in the interview. He addresses this sort of the phenomenon of new communalists, that sort of the hippie movement, the sort of cultural formation of the left that the new left became ensconced in, but also like the critique that we might seem to be making. He's saying he disagrees with that conflation. Um, well, basically, he will make the point that they aren't exactly the same. That there's a, it's not so easy to conflate the two.
Right. All right. So the Daniel Steinmetz Jenkins, who is apparently an author that works for The Nation, says, "What do you see as the essential features of the new left in thought and action? Said differently, what is it about the old left that gave rise to new left reactions?" And
Those are two different questions.
Yeah. Well, he gave it two different question marks. So,
Yes, well, so.
Maybe I'll answer both of them. We'll see. I define the New Left as an experiment in democratic organization that occurred on the margins of mass workers' parties in the middle of Europe's 20th century. Small groups of militants within the Social Democratic left and the Communist left rebelled against what they considered authoritarian leadership or obsolete structures within their own parties and unions. They tended to dislike bureaucracy, hierarchical discipline, and institutional policies of any sort. Existing organizations of the left, they believed, had assimilated to the capitalist and imperialist system. In Germany, France, and Spain, and elsewhere, these so-called neo-leftists sought instead to create non-party forms of organization, such as councils, assemblies, and action committees. These new forms might achieve a radical break from the old forms of parliamentary socialism or vanguardism that had yielded defeat, fatal compromise, or in the case of Stalinism, a revolution betrayed. This organizational revolt repeated itself over several decades, so I prefer to speak of plural new lefts rather than a singular new left that we typically associate with the 1960s. The new lefts were ideologically diverse, but they shared a strategic commitment to opposing reactionary tendencies within the old left, while at the same time opposing capitalism and the reactionary politics of the right. New lefts were born out of the crises of the old left, such as when the Nazis destroyed the German workers' parties, or when the Cold War ossified the politics of social democracy and communism. The distinctive markers of various new lefts were the preoccupation with radically democratic forms of organization, their struggles to sustain such forms over time, and their prefiguration of life in an emancipated society. Appearing as radical anti-fascism in the interwar years, left socialism after World War II, and anti-authoritarianism in the 1960s, each successive new left was a creative eruption that revived a moribund old left.
I think each successive new left could be said to dissipate out into the ether, because it was the through line from all of them is the rejection of institutionalized power, thus of parties, of discipline, and so on.
Right.
Like, we're talking about Pennacook and Gorder and people in the Third International representing the first of the new lefts, the people that Lenin called having the infantile disorder of leftism.
Wasn't that like a translation error though?
Well, no. So the translation error is left-wing communism is an infantile disorder, and I think probably the better translation is the infantile disorder of leftism within communism. It's whatever. It's basically the same thing.
It means the same thing.
Yeah. Basically, what is infantile is the idea that discipline and party structures are to be eschewed in favor of spontaneity and councils. Soviets, but without Bolsheviks. Spontaneity without planning. Basically, if Rosa Luxemburg during 1 year just represented our politics forever, that would be the origins of the new left. And I think
Right.
I kind of agree with this. I don't so much agree with the idea that each successive new left was a creative eruption that revived a moribund old left. I don't think that's true.
Yeah, neither do I. That'd be the one thing that I disagree with. I don't think. I mean, okay, so on the surface, I think it did revive it. Like in a lot of instances, it revived interests in if you look at the collapse of the communist parties following the Second World War, right? The New Left revived interest in the project of leftism, but like to a reified, totally recuperated version of it. Not reified, a recuperable version of it because it was based in so many different individual oppressions and disaggregated ways of relating to the world and to one's class and society, etc.
Right. I guess there's this emergence of an interest in the new communist movement is downstream of the fact that the old communist movement was not living up to its charge, and the new left was eschewing that charge. So the new communist movement was supposed to fill in the gap, but it was too wed to new left structures and habits to make a new old communist movement.
Yeah, but I also think it's important to emphasize the plural here, the new lefts. There's not first of all, a vibrant. What's funny about that last statement, that each successive new left was a creative eruption that revived a moribund old left, is the premise that the new left is incapable of reviving, of coming into being, of instigating change without said old left.
Right.
Yeah.
So it's kind of like, okay, there were ruptural moments and the break off groups, and we could even put Trotskyism writ large in sort of a new left schema, if we wanted to. They were not against, a party discipline. They just were dealing with a very hairy realpolitik, which made it impossible for them to replace the Comintern as the pole of attraction. And so there's like all these different formations that lead to groups of people on the left eschewing institutionalization, a la Stalinist, party forms and so forth. But that's also going on inside of, the Stalinist left. They're responding to those ruptures, kind of like the analogy we've made of the Reformation, right?
Yeah.
Inside the Catholic Church, there's all of this revival, reformation. So it's kind of quite messy. In that sense, there is a revival happening in the moribund old left.
Yeah, what's interesting about this is that, or what's interesting about that, what you just said, is that at the time that the Trotsky case is being made most broadly, it's being made by the communist parties.
Yep.
And so, it's kind of like how, you just said this. It's very much like how the Reformation. There are some effects of the Reformation that happened inside the Catholic Church, and then of course the long-term effects, the downstream of the Reformation, is eventually you have the fog machines and the Pastor Bob flies in like Bon Jovi on a cable, and it's not the same. That's not what Martin Luther wanted, I think.
So what's the analogy here is like
well, it's the same way that like you meet some weirdo who's a Trotskyist on Twitter talking about the real whatever that's like what's his name, the World Socialist website guy, the one guy. Yeah.
Oh my god, the one guy that is World Socialist website.
It's David North. Is that his name?
Yeah. Prolific film reviewer, among many things. You know what though? Well, you introduced this is not a part of our conversation, but Trotskyists online on the internet, that kind of says everything. I don't. Once you introduce the internet, it's like a whole new weird ball game of new lefts, new rights, new strange
You
as
know, we are
I don't know
in this Reformation analogy.
What are we?
We're sedevacantists.
Oh no.
I don't know how I feel
That's
about
true.
that.
We're sadists, man. Sedevacantists, for those of you who don't know, are like the Catholics that think that the Pope doesn't there's no legitimate Pope since since the Second Vatican Council, or some of them have other points from before that. Basically that there's no true Pope, and thus the Church has fallen.
But how
And
does
there needs
that?
to be.
But we're totally pro Francis and Leo.
Yeah, well, I'm talking about in political analogies.
Yes. Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah. Like politically, we're sedevacantists, and religiously, we're not.
Yeah.
Anyway.
In terms of religion, I'm a Catholic.
Well, sedevacantists think they're Catholics too.
Well, yeah. Okay.
But they're really just Protestants. I mean,
That's right.
What else do you call it? Martin Luther was the first sedevacantist.
Well, this red pilled us.
Yeah. Okay, so I'm gonna move on. This is gonna take us like 12 episodes at this rate.
Why are we reading the whole thing?
I don't know. Jason's idea.
Is that the new format of our podcast?
No, it's just the format when I don't know what our format should be. It doesn't have to be this. We could just talk and read some stuff and talk and read some stuff. I should have written down an outline and just didn't. So we have one.
Okay, carry on.
But also, you could probably skip the questions, which are stupid.
Yeah. But then, how do we set up the? No, I'm going to read the questions.
Okay.
You want me to read the question with like a news anchor voice?
Like a stupid voice. Like, is this just a recurring generational story that plays itself out on the left? Or is there something more to it? I guess that's goofy.
You just did it. Okay.
I'm going to leave all of this in.
You just did it, so answer Goofy's question.
All right. It is true that neo-leftists were, for the most part, young militants. Should I do it like a different voice, like Mickey Mouse or
No,
Edward R.
Donald
Murrow?
Duck? I should do it in a Donald Duck voice. No, okay. It is true that neo-leftists were, for the most part, young militants who rebelled against older comrades in positions of leadership within social democratic or communist party organizations. But this conflict within the party reflected young leftists' broader sense of resentment against the family, the school, the state, and other institutions that placed them in subordinate positions due to their age. This sounds so fucking dumb when you say it like that.
it really does.
Yeah. Power to the babies. Social structure exudes oldness as much as individual people. So, there was an important sociological side to how generational conflict played out on the left. Neo-leftists did not want merely to replace their elders in positions of authority. They wanted to abolish authoritarian institutions, and it was their criticism of institutional ossification as a social problem, rather than as an age problem, that made new lefts attractive to some older militants as well. Neo-leftism confronted the paradox of how to organize an internally democratic vanguard that could perpetually renew its own forms and not just reshuffle personnel in a generational succession. This always sort of, I thought about this whenever I started reading about what fascism actually was and learned that it wasn't just like when you're like a Republican but extra mean.
Or when capitalism has its back to the wall.
Yeah,
Right.
yeah. So one of the defining characteristics of fascism is a fetishization of like virility and youth. So like this whole new left idea, never trust anybody over the age of 30 or something like that. And I was like, oh, the fascists would love that, because fascism in its when it gained power made alliances with the old conservatives and stuff. He ended up with a bunch of old conservative fascists when they all joined the party. But like in its movement form, fascism is just like the anthem of the Italian fascist party is called the Giovinezza. It's like the song of youth. The idea that the youth are going to like smash and destroy the old reactionary order and bring in like the new fascist order.
Yeah.
That doesn't try to constrain them and like mold them in the ways of the old sort of decadent and ossified structures of the past.
I just think it's, if the whole point of the institution of the structure is to replace the superstructure of capitalism that you don't like, and you say, well, we're going to do this by just permanently renewing ourselves without the party structure, you have already, in the origins, in a very identifiable way, a very obvious and patent recuperation.
Yep.
Right.
Well,
into the democratic structures of the capitalist society that you live in.
Yep.
Already.
And you know what I wrote next to this last paragraph about their criticism of institutional ossification as a social problem? I wrote permanent revolution in quotation marks, because that is definitely an avenue that it takes. And when you start to try and define what that might mean, which has pretty diffuse implications, it kind of does lead you in those directions. This sort of, like whenever you start to ask left communists or Trotskyists what the alternative for the Soviet Union ought to have been, it's like the revolution within the revolution, within the revolution, within the revolution. It's like, and that's has a mirror. It finds itself in the mirror of anarchism and a lot of the things that become this soupy new left isms later on.
I'm not really into isms, man.
Your post ideology.
I have this idea that at some point we should do a discussion basically about that. The working title's Left Opposition in Perpetuity. But that's basically what we're talking about here. Is like, at a certain point, you either have to rejoin the fray or else you have to oppose the fray outright. And that's what, about a year ago, maybe 2 years ago, I don't know. At some other point, we all did a discussion about the third camp and how eventually that's the third camp Trotskyists arrayed themselves against the whole concept of the Eastern Bloc and thus put themselves on the side of what is today still there, on the side of like the institutions of NATO and so on. It's very uncomfortable, but it's definitely
a situation that people with good intentions find themselves in quite often, going all the way back to the Social Democrats who voted for war credits in the First World War. For the same reasons. Oh, we oppose the barbarism of the Russian menace. We don't want to bring autocracy to Europe. Our, very flawed Prussian-dominated system at least allows us to have a parliament. So we should side with the imperialists in our country against the imperialists in their country, because the imperialism in their country is bad. Well, and it's worse anyway.
Not only a parliament, but a parliament that has allowed social democrats, aka the socialists of the day, to come into power.
Yeah, right. Exactly.
So you can see the logic in, but I just want to so just to read it again. Neo-leftism confronted the paradox of how to organize an internally democratic vanguard that could perpetually renew its own forms, which is critical, and not just reshuffle personnel in a generational succession. This is, for many, defines the very basis of the Soviet, and maybe that's wrong, but I feel kind of called out here in a certain respect. A lot of the things that brought me toward communist and socialist politics were very neo-left, were very and because they were Trotskyist. There's just so many premises that are underneath other premises, and it's just never as neat as all that, like the very basis of that premise, undergirding it is some kind of authority, some kind of authoritarian structure, some kind of party structure that makes it possible. And I'm not just going to throw out the baby with the bathwater of oppositional left either, but there's this it's in a tension a paradox with the old left, that it's trying
We,
to. Well, I'm done. I ran out of words, but
yeah. So this next question that the author asks is basically deals with, usually people think of the 1960s. However, you start it with the writings of Hungarian Marxist Georg Lukács. How does the old left versus the new left play itself out in Lukács's thought? And the answer is the book begins 50 years earlier than the global new left of the 1960s because I think the form of neo-leftist theory and practice originated in the revolutionary crisis of World War I. I chose to focus on Georg Lukács for two reasons. First, his early writings, plus the 1923 book The History of Class Consciousness, are widely considered the foundations of Marxism, of Western Marxism, which was an intellectual current that examined the dialectical relationships between social reproduction and cultural or aesthetic forms, as opposed to the economic determinism of Soviet Marxism. Lukács's concepts of reification, alienation, and totality served as a reference point, especially for German Marxist theorists of the Frankfurt School. Neo-leftists in later decades would be inspired by their ideas along with those of other Western Marxists such as Antonio Gramsci and Jean-Paul Sartre. Even before he became a Marxist, Lukács was concerned with the social limits of art forms such as the essay and novel. I interpret his early works as a quest for revolutionary newness in culture, which over the course of World War I led him into the domains of ethics and politics. By the time he joined the Communist Party, Lukács had transported his aesthetic theory into a political key. Now he examined the social limits of the party form, both in its electoral and its vanguardist varieties. He placed great hope in the emerging non-party form, the Workers' and Soldiers' Councils or Soviets, which cropped up everywhere during the revolutionary crisis of 1918 and 1919. The second reason I chose Lukács is that he puts his theory of new forms into practice while serving as Deputy Commissar of Education and Culture under the short-lived Hungarian Soviet Republic, occasionally dodging bullets as he delivered speeches at the front line in the Hungarian Red Army's doomed fight for survival in the summer of 1919. He embodied the type of engaged intellectual that would catalyze Europe's new left over the coming half century. There's a universe of difference between the new left that Lukács represents and the people having orgies to fight the patriarchy in the early 1970s.
Yeah, I mean, Lukács, who is a figure of the Hungarian Soviet Republic and of the post-revolutionary Communist Party for his entire life. And the other people he mentions, Antonio Gramsci, who's principally a student of and proponent of what we now call the Leninist theory of the party. He was a member of the Communist Party, and he was a critic of Trotsky's abandonment of the Bolshevik family.
Yeah.
And the other names are Sartre, who was sometimes a member of the Communist Party, and later on in his life was a Maoist activist. He was one of the issues here is that when he says there are new lefts, but then he talks about them as they're all sort of similar, and we should take the first thing he says very seriously, and they're not similar. The first couple of examples are new lefts from within the Comintern-oriented communist parties. New lefts as a direct inheritor and recipient of the tradition or of the legacy of 1917, as opposed to the Frankfurt School, who might occupy a middle space between Lukács and the Port Huron statement, the driving to DC in a school bus and having an orgy on the road trip.
I think
there's a world, like you said, there's a world of difference.
Yeah, but I don't think that's the point of he's mapping out a genealogy. He's not saying one necessarily leads to the other. He's going back to Lukács and mapping out how the Frankfurt School takes up a lot of his work. And we should mention that Lukács, his most famous work that is so seminal in the Western Marxism tradition, he disowned, through pressure from the Soviet Union and I think he's just laying out that there is a kind of wooden state ideology, and it has its critiques internally to the communist movement, and later it has its critiques coming from without. And he's just saying that Lukács is sort of this genesis for many of those critiques within and without. Not that they're all alike. That's the importance of this sort of plural new lefts, right? That there's many.
Yeah. No, yeah, that's true. That's a good point.
All right. Shall I read more?
Yeah.
How does the revolt of new against old play itself out in the anti-fascist movements of the 1930s? The main current of anti-fascism in the 30s was the Popular Front, or the alliance of convenience between social democrats, communists, and bourgeois democrats against their common fascist foes. Popular Front governments formed in France and Spain, and the appeal of this big tent coalition extended well beyond electoral politics. Workers and middle-class professionals built cross-class solidarity, and artists produced classic works of proletarian culture. But to neo-leftists, the Popular Front seemed to reduce anti-fascism to an ideological minimum. Safeguarding democracy often meant postponing the task of social revolution indefinitely. And that's currently where the anti-fascism has atrophied, is the way it did in the 1930s, and it's still applied that way, as if every single Republican threat to the mainstream status quo in the United States is a fascist threat. And this goes back to before Donald Trump, by the way.
Yeah.
Underground in Germany and in exile, the group New Beginning, for example, developed a theory of fascism that stressed both its capitalist character and its mass psychological appeal. Drawing on the work of left-wing psychoanalysts such as William Reich, New Beginning thought that the anti-fascist struggle could only succeed as a revolution of everyday life. Ugh. Revolutionary attitudes were rooted in sexual repression, the patriarchal family, and the conservative churches. So the anti-fascist New Left needed emancipatory cultural politics, such as it needed revolutionary class politics. So here's where it all goes wrong.
With Wilhelm Reich.
Yeah, and
it all goes wrong at the very beginning of the first New Leftism.
I think is Reich's book is called The Mass Psychology of Fascism. Is that right?
Something like that.
It's a really, really bad book.
Can you repeat that for me? Because I didn't hear what you said.
Oh, The Mass Psychology of Fascism.
Okay.
And it's not good. That's all I'll say.
Yeah.
It is in no way helpful.
I like his later stuff about orgone. That's way better.
That's the weird stuff, right? I haven't read Reich, but I've heard that he's a real mixed bag. But I feel like
he goes from sort of regular crackpot shit to insane crackpot shit.
Yeah, it's like if you had a bag and the bag was full of roaches and also wasps and also
God.
other bugs you wouldn't want to get let out of the bag.
Yeah, it's a very mixed bag. Roaches and wasps and other bad bugs. Jason is the king of analogies, though, dude. You gotta hand it to him.
Yeah, you know that scene in the Temple of Doom whenever they go into the room full of bugs.
Yeah,
that's what it's like to read Wilhelm Reich.
So, this passage here I thought was very interesting because we have had almost purely negative. I'm going to say you both have had almost purely negative reactions to neo-leftism since we've been reading this.
Are you surprised?
No, but I'm just saying, to neo-leftists, the Popular Front seemed to reduce anti-fascism to an ideological minimum. And that's something we agree with. So
yes,
we share the criticisms of Popular Frontism with neo-leftism, which is an interesting point of convergence.
Sure. But, I mean, I think that there's a lot more nuance involved in our criticism of neo-leftism, as Jason tries to bring up every single time someone says, oh yeah, Popular Frontism is bad.
Yeah.
It's
yeah. The Popular Front was not bad. Popular Frontism is bad. And
there we go.
That distinction matters. That's a distinction I would be willing to make this and other whole episodes about.
I really appreciate how he just lists all of the parties involved, which often is not done. There's social democrats, communists, and bourgeois democrats. And oftentimes the former and the latter are not listed separately. Social democrats and bourgeois democrats. And that's kind of the tension in Popular Frontism, right?
Right.
That is inescapable.
Well, I mean, communists say that it's the often say, oh yeah, it's an alliance between progressive liberalism and communists because they considered social democrats just another kind of progressive liberalism.
Social fascists.
Oh, yeah. Anyway, so.
Рабочие и крестьяне не смогут прожить без нас некому будет установить порядок, определить работу, принудить к труду. Без нас все развалится и государство распадется.